Welcome to another episode of the Barron Report, where we talk about all things innovation in restaurant and hospitality. Today, we're going to be breaking down some of the top news. And the first one, I think, is an interesting one, and that is my topic of cash is king. Let's go right into this. Philadelphia has passed a law requiring almost all businesses to accept cash payments, effectively banning cashless stores. Now, this kind of comes into play for both restaurants and retail. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but this does go into force July 1st. And businesses which violate this can face a fine up to $2,000. So this is a pretty hefty move by the city of Philadelphia. It's interesting to see how this will be implemented. And we had a chance to talk with Councilman Bill Greenlee, who was one of the individuals who kind of led the charge on developing the bill and eventually the law. So we got a chance to talk with Bill that really broke down into what the bill was about, first of all, kind of how and why they went about putting it into place, and then also some of the effects that this bill would have on both retail store giants like Amazon Go, as well as restaurant concepts. So listen into the podcast and kind of get an inside view of what Councilman Greenlee had to say.
Well, I noticed that there were a couple places that were not accepting cash anymore. They had to have a credit card. And there seemed to be a basic unfairness there, because there is in the country generally, but Philadelphia, because unfortunately we have the title of the poorest big city in America, a sizable amount of people that are what's called unbanked. They don't have a credit card. They don't have any credit. They don't have a bank account, that kind of thing. It was likely that person who could not buy that product, even though they had enough in currency, in American cash, was more than likely to be lower on the lower income scale, could be a minority and or immigrant. And it struck me that it was setting up an us and them kind of situation. And even though I'm not saying any of these places were intentionally discriminating, it certainly was in my opinion, a form of discrimination, even if it wasn't intentional. To sum it up in one word, I see it as a fairness issue. Yeah, the bill is actually pretty straightforward. And by the way, it takes effect July 1st to give places that have gone cashless to have some time to convert. Amazon raised some issues about coming in with their Amazon Go. Yeah, we have put some language in there that we think at least we can work with Amazon if indeed they're still concerned. But as far as the businesses here, I saw a quote in the paper from one of them that basically says they don't agree with it, but they'll live with it. In other words, it won't stop them from doing business. On the other hand, we have heard from many, many consumers, even interestingly enough, people who normally on most part use credit cards, who said they think the bill makes sense for kind of the reasons I said earlier, that a fairness issue.
So you get a chance to understand really how they are trying to implement this. What I found kind of interesting was Councilman Greenlee kind of walked back the law a bit to adjust for Amazon Go. And obviously Amazon Go stores are integrated into a Prime membership. And obviously to set up a Prime membership, you do have to have a credit card to be able to actually get a Prime membership. So I could see how a store like that could be able to get by in cities like Philadelphia to be able to offer their services without accepting cash. Where this may get a little muddy is in these membership programs, because if you look at Costco and Sam's Club and those types of retail establishments, memberships are required to get in and get those discounts. Obviously, those memberships are purchased via credit card if you're doing it online. However, in some cases, memberships can be purchased by cash if it's a physical unit like a Costco. So obviously, Costco accepts cash and credit card. There are going to be some interesting ways I think this will start to play out, especially as technology continues to advance in retail. Where this will eventually affect the restaurant business is brands like Sweetgreen, who actually were one of the charging restaurant concepts that were going cashless. I wonder at this point to what position Sweetgreen will take with cities like Philadelphia dropping into banning these cashless type of retail establishments. What's interesting also is now New Jersey has also banned cashless businesses. So proponents there could characterize it as kind of an attempt to ensure that consumers without credit cards can participate in the economy. So it's still a discrimination topic, I believe, when you look at where both these states, being Pennsylvania and New Jersey, are starting to position. And I do see with these two states taking a stand on this, we'll probably start to see more and more legislation start to roll into this. So I don't think this is over by any short distance. I think this is potentially going to be a long haul for the restaurant industry. Let's also look at some of the data. So if we look at cash as one of the most frequent forms of payment, cash is the most frequent form of payment option, accounting for 30% of all transactions and 55% of transactions under $10. Again, skewing toward the restaurant industry. And then if you look at debit cards, purchases between 10 and 25 bucks, basically debit cards were used 34% of the time. And it's the first year debit was used at a higher rate than cash within this price range. So that's an interesting data set to look at, which also goes toward restaurants and retail establishments, since your price points could be much higher in things like full service restaurants versus maybe QSR and fast casual. The last is the most frequent in usage. So average daily value of cash held by customers was like 59 bucks. And I think this is one of those factors as you look at the industry and where cash is going to be used. The restaurant industry is definitely one of the major categories and sectors of business that cash is pretty much king. And I think for us to be able to see this being affected on restaurants, I think with Philadelphia and New Jersey both moving to ban this, I think we will see some maybe some steps back from the restaurant industry to move toward more of these automation aspects. The question will be, I think, is with companies like a Sweetgreen, do they eventually go to some sort of type of membership or something that would require you to maybe, be an app user or something of that nature? I can't necessarily see a restaurant business doing that, because maybe I am a user of Sweetgreen and I just don't have their app, but I have a credit card. Obviously, they're going to take my my credit card. And if they're doing that, then it would be contradictive to the law that both Philadelphia and New Jersey have passed, in the sense that if you're taking a non-member credit card, you'd also have to take a non-member cash payment. So I do think that's going to be kind of the stance of where cashless is going to face a big proponent of both retail and restaurant in the coming years. So we'll definitely keep an eye on this and continue to watch it. Let's move on to our next topic, and that is foam no more. And this is kind of the foam ban that is starting to occur. So as you can see from today's show, we've got a lot of legislation that's really hitting the streams in terms of where it can be affecting restaurants. And of course, Maryland's House of Delegates has advanced legislation, House Bill 109, that would essentially prohibit food service providers from selling food and drinks in single-use containers. So that's pretty much saying that, any kind of foam or single-use container is pretty much out. This will be interesting when you look at how restaurants will start to respond to this, because packaging, especially in to-go, and when you look at on-demand delivery, these are huge factors in the industry itself, especially in the area of growth. Covered establishments in this House bill would be including restaurants, grocery stores, food trucks, schools, movie theaters, publicly or privately owned cafeterias. Obviously, the most recent bill language will also include cups, plates, trays, takeout containers, egg cartons, containers of meat, poultry, seafood would be excluded. So there are some factors in here that would still allow for carrier use in terms of supplier, and I think that's going to be fine. The big question is going to be takeout delivery and on-demand delivery. I think those are going to be two of the categories that will be affected in a very big way. Foodable Labs shows that over 65% of the restaurant industry uses foam containers, and this is according to Social Mentions. So it's a massive part of our business model on a day in, day out basis. And when you look at kind of the aspect of where this legislation is stemming from, and also what we're seeing in the overall aspect of how consumer perception is starting to play a really big role in how restaurants and retail businesses interact with them. What we're looking at is essentially kind of the sentiment aspect of that. What kind of hits will brands take when they are using this from the consumer side? So that'll be interesting to kind of see. Additionally, the world is currently producing more than 14 million tons, U.S. tons of polystyrene, which is plastic foam, each year, and Americans are throwing away about 25 billion in styrofoam cups every year. So this obviously is a big problem in the industry, and I think with Baltimore passing this foam ban in 2018, which will be set to take effect later this year, 2019, while other cities across the country, including Seattle, San Francisco, and New York, have enacted similar bans. And I think this is going to be one of the factors that we're going to be facing in the coming years. If the bill does pass, food service operators would be forced to stop offering foam containers by July 1st, 2020. Violators would be notified and receive 3 months to correct their behavior, and continued noncompliance after that period would basically hit them with a penalty of $250. So I think as we see trends moving into more eco-friendly packaging, as I was referring to, consumers much more aware of the impact of the restaurant industry as a whole on our environment and on our society. I think this is something that is pretty much been on the bullseye target for a while, and now it's actually happening. So take a look at this graphic, which is really kind of our Foodable Labs graphic on 52% of food influencers under the age of 35 are making dining decisions based on to-go packaging or to-go products. And this is recorded from about 320,000 social conversations around food packaging. So essentially what that's saying is that as I start to dine out and you've got a cool or reusable or compostable packaging, I appreciate that as a consumer, and I'm willing to maybe put you on my target list of a frequent restaurant that I'm going to. And I think that's going to have something to say, especially as the business continues to move on. Even more important is the issue of the brand themselves being damaged in the overall sentiment. And I think that's going to be the one that is probably the one that will really reshift how brands think about their packaging, is the fact that though consumers may select your restaurant, the real factor, I think, is if the brand starts to take a hit, whether it's from press or social media, that's where I think the tipping point will occur, and we'll see a pretty major move. Let's move on to our last topic, and that is that UberEATS is rolling out a new fee structure. And when I saw this, the first thing was I thought, okay, this is going to be a really good, this is going to be a great thing for the industry. When I started reading through it and understanding it, I was just getting more confusing to me. So let's try to break this down and kind of go into it. So as of this past March 18th, you no longer see booking fees on UberEATS. So if you're a UberEATS user, you used to have that, everything from free to up to maybe $7.95 for a delivery. Those are no longer there. So now instead, orders are going to be delivered with UberEATS can use these type of fees. Delivery fees varied for each restaurant based on things like your location and the availability of nearby couriers. And then you'll also kind of know how much you're going to pay before selecting a restaurant. So I think that's going to be a big key. Service fees equal to about 15% of the order subtotal are going to be charged. And I don't necessarily think this fee applies to restaurants that deliver their own orders. What will be interesting is small orders that are maybe less than $10. That's where I think the fee ratio may not necessarily be worth it for an Uber order. So that could affect both QSR fast food as well as fast casual, who have price points that are designed below that $10 range. So this will be interesting to see kind of how this starts to play into the consumer aspect. If there's any consumer pushback, I don't necessarily see a pushback from the restaurant side of it, at least as of yet. I think it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But to kind of give you an idea of where the proximity aspect of this is going to be going, delivery fees from $149 and upwards to about $8 depending on distance. In some markets, there's still an option to share couriers, when an order is already placed at a restaurant for nothing, basically free, and that service fee still remains. So key services that people are going to love about and continue, I think, to love about Uber is you still get the curated list of delivery options instead of looking around for what restaurants deliver. More options outside the typical delivery windows, and the ability to order something like a cup of coffee and a donut. In most cases is somewhat cost effective. So we'll kind of see how that continues to play out here with the price points changing with Uber. Here's some things that I think we have to look at. And when you look at kind of where Uber has been in the past few years, they have really positioned the brand being UberEATS in a way, I think, that kind of has locked in the restaurant industry to utilizing them along with a handful of other players. But this fee structure has always been one that is kind of almost user-centric, and I think that's the one that is a bit more confusing. I know even on my own personal experience and some of our team here, we could be looking at the same thing on UberEATS and getting, two different fee structures in the past. And I think the idea behind Uber's move to try to deal with this and kind of cut down on some of that confusion may not necessarily be cutting down on confusion, may actually be enhancing confusion with all these new various factors and variants that kind of play into this. So I do think that this is going to be one of those scenarios that Uber is trying a lot of new things right now. And I believe that is because UberEATS is still a somewhat trial aspect of their logistics business, when the restaurant industry has kind of blown up on the aspect of on-demand delivery. I still think Uber has got a lot to learn, and they're trying to do some things to basically get those learnings so they can understand how to enhance. And I think that's coming from a few pressure points. Obviously, we are seeing pressure points from, places like Grubhub's, Postmates, DoorDash, and so on, along with the bit of pushback from the restaurant industry on the fees for the restaurateur themselves from Uber. So there's a lot of circling factors here that I do think are going to change how Uber continues to set their pricing. Don't be surprised if we see this structure change again in the near future, because I do think there could be some scenarios where customers will start to kind of maybe even push back or be more confused than what they were around the app itself. A lot left for UberEATS in terms of growth. And I do think that they are in a position still to kind of take the leading edge position for on-demand delivery, as long as they don't really get in any kind of restaurant wars or consumer wars in terms of these fee structures. So that's really my take on where we're going with UberEATS. As you can see in today's episode, we've had a ton of legislation affecting the restaurant industry. I think we're going to continue to see a lot more social impact, and there are some factors that I think are playing into this. And of course, restaurants are really kind of dead in the center of the bullseye. And the reason for this is I do believe that we are seeing the Gen Z and the Gen Y starting to take a very heavy role in terms of their spending in the restaurant business. And because of that, they are starting to utilize their social aspect, whether it's social media or their understanding of what value the industry is to them. And I think that's going to be a big factor when you look at things like value graphics instead of demographics. In other words, what consumers think of your restaurant versus the type of consumer that restaurant is trying to market to. With all of those kind of things, such as cashless and the phone ban, packaging, issues with these upcharges from Ubers, it does trend to see we are in for a very tumultuous time in the restaurant industry as technology continues to kind of put some roadblocks in front of what's happening in the business. That's pretty much for today on the Barron Report. I want to continue to cover the topics like this. So if you have some ideas, we try to cover these as much as we can weekly. In some cases, we'll skip a week or so, but for the most part, we'll stay right on cue here on the Barron Report Live. If you're catching us live right now, You can also catch this show in segments over at foodabletv.com. If you have an idea or a topic for the Barron Report, because we do interviews here as well as covering news, make sure and shoot an email over to producer@foodabletv.com, or you can also hit us up on Twitter. I am at Paul Barron or at Foodable, of course, on Twitter, and that's where we'll get your feedback and information. Make sure and subscribe to my podcast if you have not checked it out. You can get that on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening in to the Barron Report. We'll catch you next time.